Listen, man, remind me never, ever, 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 ever to piss off someone from Michigan, because Michiganders, like you guys, you don't play around when you're pissed off. So I've got a quick little update, but an important update to a video that I just posted like a couple hours ago because my sources in Michigan have sent me new information. So we took a look at this story from Raw Story a couple hours ago. Governor Gretchen Whitmer tells Mike Pence in leaked call that Michigan anti-lockdown protesters spread COVID-19 to rural areas. Some protesters who descended on the Michigan state capitol to demand the state reopen the economy in spite of the ongoing coronavirus pandemic have spread infections in rural areas where they live, Governor Gretchen Whitmer told Vice President Mike Pence in a recorded phone call obtained by ABC News. Whitmer, a Democrat, asked Pence to discourage the demonstrations after the state's data suggested that protesters brought COVID-19 back to their rural communities. We have seen from the initial protests here is that we've got COVID-19 spread in rural parts of our state from which people have traveled, Whitmer reportedly told Pence. Whitmer added that the alarming trend could derail the state's plans to begin reopening. And so, our ability to move on to the next phase and keep re-engaging our economy, I'm just concerned about it, Whitmer said. We're going to keep watching these numbers and doing the tests. And when I did the video a couple hours ago, my biggest question is like, how does she know that? How does she know that COVID-19 is spreading because of the protesters? Like, what data does she have? What information does she have? Well, now we know. She was lying. She was lying from her own mouth. She has no evidence. She has no data. She just has conjecture and stories that she's made up in her head. This is not real information. Let's watch the evidence, shall we? This is from a press conference she held yesterday.
Governor, you said this morning on The View that the protests that we've been seeing at the Capitol could be potentially adding to the spread of COVID-19 as people not listen to the stay-at-home orders and congregate. What proof do you have to show that that's happening, and as well as COVID-19 spreading into rural areas because of that?
Yeah, so I think that, I saw one report. I don't have proof. I'm not following everybody home and taking their temperatures and watching them for 2 weeks. But here's what we know. When COVID-19, the way that it spreads is person-to-person contact, that it can stay in the air for a while, that it is when you're closer than 6 feet, not wearing masks. It is when you're touching one another. And we saw a lot of that at these protests at the Capitol. And that's how COVID-19 spreads. We know it's incredibly contagious. And there are a lot of people who get COVID-19 who are asymptomatic, and so they're conducting life as though they're healthy because they honestly think they're healthy, but they're carrying it and spreading it. And that's how COVID-19, that's the insidious nature of this virus. And so that has always been a concern. When people congregate, they take it back to their communities. We've seen that over and over again. There was a group that did a report that they had put up a geo fence around the Capitol and then monitored cell phone data, and that it translates where we are seeing hot spots in rural parts of Michigan. I don't know the group. I have not vetted the data. I can't vouch for it, but I think that would not be a surprising outcome if that was the case.
And no one, literally no one, is surprised by that, right? No one is surprised by that. No one is surprised that Gretchen was just making things up, and now it's out there. And this is the problem, folks. This is the problem with these little fucking offhanded statements, is they don't come, like, okay, for the party that is like, we are the party of science, we are the party of facts, we are the party of data. They made it up. They made it up, and now it's out there, and it's going to take on a life of its own, and we're going to see stories about, oh, these protesters are just spreading the plague all around the state. It's not true. They don't have the data to back it up. Listen, man, if they presented data to say, yes, these protests are directly linked, this person got sick at the protest, took the virus back to their communities, and spread it around like wildfire, if they had data to show that, I would shut the hell up. I would. But I don't think they do have data to show that. I think they're making things up in order to fearmonger. And the reason that I think they're making things up in order to fearmonger is, oh, look at this story from it's on Yahoo News, but I guess from National Review. Coronavirus cases in Georgia, Florida continue to decline despite business opening. And this is from yesterday. Some states engaged in reopening their economies have not yet seen coronavirus outbreaks feared by health officials. In particular, Georgia and Florida, which were projected to see a sharp rise in new cases, have not experienced major new outbreaks in the past week. The average number of new daily cases in Florida declined by 14% over the past week, and Georgia's average new daily cases dropped by 12% during the same time period, according to an analysis by Axios. The data on new cases is imperfect because of the variations between states and the amount and frequency of coronavirus testing. As of Wednesday, Florida has confirmed blah, blah, blah. So essentially what we're saying is, based on what we know so far, there are not an increase in cases in the states that have reopened. They don't have the data to show that either. So a lot of people are afraid. Listen, man, I get that a lot of people are afraid, but you got to be diligent about this stuff. You got to look for the data. You got to back it up. You have to really search beyond what they're telling you, because so many people are afraid that listen, when people are afraid, they concoct stories in their head to try to reinforce that fear. It's like if you think there's a monster under the bed, and all of a sudden you hear a creak in the floor that could really come from almost anything, you're like, aha, that's proof there's a monster under my bed. Or if you think there's a monster in the closet and all of a sudden maybe something falls off the shelf in the closet and it makes a bang, aha, there's a monster in my closet. People look for ways to reaffirm these things when they're in these worked up states. That's essentially, it's like confirmation bias, man. We look for things to prove what we believe is the truth. Now, when you're doing research, when you're doing academic research that it is supposed to be conducted in an ethical way, what you're supposed to do is to look for data that goes directly counter to what you believe is happening. You're supposed to disrupt your own confirmation bias. Gretchen Whitmer is not disrupting her own confirmation bias. Instead, she's spinning herself up. I don't know if she believes it. And this is the question in my head, is she acting from a place of authenticity where she's actually believing these things? I can definitely see a reality in which she would be acting from a place where she really does believe that this stuff is happening. Or is she acting in a place of bad faith where she's just trying to lock down power and control? Now, based on the fact, though, that she's really retaliating against anyone that goes against her, she's actively retaliating against anyone that goes against her, I have to believe that it's more bad faith than good faith. I don't think that she's coming from a place of genuine care, of genuine concern. And the reason I say that is what we're going to leave off with on this particular video. One more quote from the press conference about how she really hopes that people don't have to get tickets, but if they do, they do.
Do you want to see MSP hand out tickets tomorrow for people not social distancing and not wearing masks?
I think the Michigan State Police is monitoring all of the conversations around this event tomorrow, that they are prepared and are working with the Attorney General. I think we've seen some joint statements today, and I believe that if there is a reason to issue a ticket, that they're prepared to do that. I'm hopeful that they don't have reason to.